Behind every chart-topping hit and stadium tour, there's another side to the story. Betrayals, power struggles, and the ruthless decisions that tore bands apart. Some of the biggest names in pop and rock didn't walk away quietly. They were pushed. From the Beatles swapping out their drummer right before global fame, to Fleetwood Mac cutting ties with a founding member after decades together, these sackings were messy, shocking, and sometimes tragic. This is pop lore, and today we're counting down 10 musicians who were brutally sacked from their bands. The stories you thought you knew, and the ones you've never heard, all in one countdown.
I first met the guys when they opened my mother's club, the Casbah, way back in 1958 when they were known.
Few stories in popular music history sting quite like Pete Best's. Before the world knew Ringo Starr, it was Best who sat behind the drum kit as the Beatles took their first steps toward stardom. He had the looks, the charisma, and, by most fan accounts, the popularity to match John, Paul, and George.
I joined them August 1960. Simply because of the fact that
Gigs in Liverpool's Cavern Club or during their grueling residencies in Hamburg, Best drew screaming fans who saw him as the handsome Beatle. But in the studio things looked different. Producer George Martin was unimpressed with Best's drumming, calling it inconsistent.
in a nutshell, you know, the boys want you out and they want Ringo Starr in. Well, I was completely...
John, Paul, and George, keen to secure their big break, leaned on manager Brian Epstein to make the call. In August 1962, Best was quietly dismissed and replaced by Ringo Starr, who had been filling in on occasion.
I had mediocre success. I got a couple of records in the charts.
The timing was brutal. Within months, the Beatles exploded into global superstardom. Pete Best, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, working everyday jobs while the band he once anchored rewrote the rules of pop culture. His story has become the ultimate tale of being almost famous, and a reminder of how ruthless timing and decisions can be in the music world.
Just had to dance, started moving my feet.
Brian Jones wasn't just a member of the Rolling Stones, he was their architect. In 1962, he placed an ad that recruited Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. He named the band, managed its earliest shows, and was the group's first leader. On stage, he was a multi-instrumentalist wizard, weaving slide guitar, sitar, dulcimer, and countless textures into the Stones' early sound. But by the late 60s, Jones was unraveling. Heavy drug use, legal troubles, and erratic behavior made him increasingly unreliable in the studio. Jagger and Richards had also taken control of the band's songwriting, pushing Jones to the sidelines. In June 1969, he was asked to leave. The official line was that his lifestyle made it impossible for him to tour. Just 3 weeks later, Jones was found dead at his Sussex home, drowned in his swimming pool under circumstances that remain mysterious.
When the police knocked, those doors flew back.
His dismissal, followed so quickly by his death, became one of rock's darkest turning points. The Stones moved forward with guitarist Mick Taylor and embarked on their iconic Let It Bleed era. But for fans, Jones' firing marked the end of the band's original spirit and the beginning of a colder, harder Rolling Stones. Dave Mustaine's firing from Metallica is one of the most notorious sackings in metal history, brutal in both its timing and its aftermath. In the early 80s, Mustaine's aggressive, intricate guitar work defined Metallica's thrash sound. His riffs powered early songs like The Four Horsemen and Jump in the Fire, but his violent temper and heavy drinking made him a constant source of tension. On the eve of recording their debut album, Kill 'Em All, the band had enough. Without warning, James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and Cliff Burton told him he was out. They handed him a bus ticket from New York back to Los Angeles. No return flight, no second chance. The brutality of that decision haunted Mustaine, who watched as Kirk Hammett replaced him, and Metallica became one of the biggest bands in history. But Mustaine refused to disappear. Fueled by anger, he formed Megadeth, a band that would rival Metallica in both speed and skill. Though he carried the bitterness for decades, publicly clashing with his former bandmates, Mustaine's sacking ultimately gave the world two of metal's most influential bands. His story remains the ultimate example of how personal downfall can ignite creative rebirth. Syd Barrett was Pink Floyd's founding visionary. His psychedelic songwriting, whimsical lyrics, and experimental guitar tones defined the band's early sound. From the Piper at the Gates of Dawn to underground London gigs, Barrett wasn't just in the band, he was the band's identity. But by 1967 through 68, Barrett's heavy LSD use and mental health struggles began to overwhelm him. He would show up to gigs unable to play, sometimes staring blankly at the audience, sometimes detuning his guitar mid-performance. The band initially tried to work around him, even recruiting guitarist David Gilmour to support him on stage. But eventually, the others made a quiet decision. They would stop picking him up for rehearsals and shows. Barrett simply faded out, replaced by Gilmour, without a direct confrontation. The ousting was quiet, but no less brutal. Barrett was left behind as Pink Floyd became one of the biggest bands in the world. He spent most of his later life in seclusion, painting and gardening until his death in 2006. Yet his influence never disappeared. Echoes of his style lived on in Floyd's later work, most notably in Wish You Were Here, their elegy to the friend they left behind. The story of Florence Ballard is one of the most heartbreaking in Motown's history. As a founding member of the Supremes, she helped form the group's harmonies and was its emotional center. But as the 60s progressed, Diana Ross was pushed to the forefront, both musically and publicly. Manager Berry Gordy saw Ross as the future and increasingly sidelined Ballard. Tensions within the group grew. Ballard, struggling with depression and alcoholism, clashed with Ross and Gordy. By 1967, she was fired and replaced by Cindy Birdsong. Ross and the Supremes soared to international superstardom, while Ballard's solo career floundered without Motown's backing. Her descent was tragic. Financial troubles and health issues plagued her, and she died in 1976 at just 32 years old. Fans and historians often see her story as symbolic of how ruthless the music business can be. Talent alone isn't always enough, especially when power dynamics and favoritism come into play. But by 1977, as punk's media circus spun out of control, Matlock was pushed aside. The official story? He was fired for liking the Beatles too much. Manager Malcolm McLaren loved that narrative. It made the Pistols look more anarchic, more dangerous. But insiders knew the truth ran deeper. Matlock clashed constantly with Johnny Rotten, whose sneering vocals and confrontational style clashed with Matlock's more traditional musical instincts. Enter Sid Vicious. He couldn't play bass to save his life, but he looked like a punk icon. The swap was brutal, trading skill for spectacle, but it cemented the Pistols' mythology. For Matlock, being ousted meant missing the short, fiery peak of punk's most infamous band. For fans, it symbolized how image sometimes matters more than music in pop history. If Joe Strummer was the conscience of The Clash, Mick Jones was its heartbeat. His guitar work, arrangements, and songwriting shaped the band's evolution from punk firebrands to genre-bending innovators. Tracks like Train in Vain and Should I Stay or Should I Go bore his mark, but success took its toll. By 1983, tensions between Jones, Strummer, and management boiled over. Jones was labeled unreliable, late to rehearsals, wrapped up in side projects, and increasingly hard to work with. Strummer, under pressure to keep the Clash relevant, sided with management and made the call. Jones was fired from the very band he had co-created. The Clash soldiered on briefly, but without him, they lost their edge. The firing essentially signaled the beginning of the end. Jones went on to form Big Audio Dynamite, while Strummer kept searching for the fire that had once united them. For fans, Jones's ousting remains one of punk's most painful betrayals. Fleetwood Mac had always been a band of clashing personalities, but Lindsey Buckingham's 2018 dismissal showed that brutal sackings weren't confined to rock's golden era. They still happen in the modern age. Buckingham wasn't just a guitarist. He was an architect of the band's sound, co-producing Rumours and Tusk, and writing some of their most enduring hits. But his relationship with Stevie Nicks had been fraught for decades, and tension simmered just below the surface. In 2018, ahead of a major world tour, the breaking point came. Reports suggested scheduling disagreements and renewed conflict with Nicks. The result? Buckingham was fired, suddenly and publicly, after more than 40 years in and out of the band. He sued Fleetwood Mac for breach of contract and later settled, but the damage was done. For fans, it was a shocking reminder that even decades of history, success, and shared legacy don't guarantee loyalty in the world of pop music. Heart rose in the 1970s on the strength of Ann and Nancy Wilson's soaring vocals and fierce songwriting. But behind them, Roger Fisher's guitar was the backbone. His riffs on songs like Barracuda gave Heart their hard rock credibility. Yet Fisher's personal relationship with Nancy Wilson complicated everything. When the romance collapsed, so did the band's stability. Add in creative tensions and clashing egos, and the situation became untenable. In 1979, Fisher was fired, effectively cut out of the band he helped bring to the top. The ousting was painful not only for Fisher, but for fans who saw Heart as more than just a pair of sisters. It had been a band. His departure signaled a new era where the Wilsons would dominate the narrative, leaving Fisher's contributions overshadowed. For many, it remains one of classic rock's most personal and brutal splits. This video is sponsored by the Lore Store on Amazon, your one-stop shop for music lovers across reggae, rock, pop, and hip-hop. We built it for real listeners who don't want to dig through 1,000 listings to find the right gear. Inside the Lore Store, you'll find 5 aisles. VIP, top, battle-tested essentials. Headphones, turntables, speakers, gig-safe earplugs, smart speakers. Reggae Vibe, Roots and Lovers. Rock Made Easy, automatic decks, warm bookshelf speakers, vinyl care. Rock Lore, classic rock must-haves. Open back cans, simple amps, living room concert vibes. Pop Lore, feel-good everyday setups, clean, clear speakers, easy streaming, nostalgia-friendly picks. Hip-hop must-haves, punchy bass without the muddle, closed-back headphones and living room systems that handle low end, plus a rotating crate of old album vinyl if you're rebuilding a 60s-90s collection. Every product page tells you who it's for, 3 pros, 1 con, and why we picked it. So you can choose with confidence. Flying soon? Check. VIP for noise canceling that tames plane roar. Mostly listening at home? Try open-back headphones that let live albums breathe. Want instant gratification vinyl? Our fully automatic turntable is one button from silence to music, and the record cleaning kit knocks down crackle so the bass tightens up. Headed to shows? Grab high-fidelity earplugs. Hands-free at home? Our smart speaker picks let you say, play 70s reggae or classic pop, and you're there. Deal alert! If you use the link in the description, you'll land on our curated picks with current best available Amazon pricing and active discounts where applicable. Prices change, so buy now to lock in today's deal. Tap the link in the description, pick your aisle, grab a favorite, and tell me which category you want me to build next. The Lore Store. Listen better, with gear that gets out of the way and lets the music live. Though more metal than pop, Paul Di'Anno's story deserves the top spot for sheer brutality and cultural impact. As the original frontman of Iron Maiden, his gritty, punk-infused vocals defined their first two albums, Iron Maiden and Killers. Di'Anno embodied the band's raw, street-level energy, but offstage, his lifestyle spiraled. Struggling with cocaine and alcohol, he grew unreliable, missing rehearsals and failing to deliver consistent performances. For Steve Harris and the rest of the band, Maiden's ambitions were too big to be derailed. In 1981, they made the decision to sack him. Replacing him with Bruce Dickinson was a gamble, but it paid off, catapulting Iron Maiden into global superstardom throughout the 80s. For Di'Anno, the dismissal was devastating. He continued performing with smaller projects, but never again reached the same heights. His firing stands as one of rock's defining pivots, proof that sometimes the brutal decision reshapes music history itself. The journey doesn't end here, pop lovers. Watch this next.